Um, Good afternoon, everybody. Today is Thursday, October 19th. This is MS Office Hours. I am one of your hosts. My name is Heather Cox, and with me today are
Victoria Dean.
Hey everyone, I'm Garrett Chandler.
And I'm Andrea Singh Rio. Super excited to have all of you with us today. I am going to quickly get out of the way here and hand this right over to a good friend of mine and account executive, Lorna Farrell, and let you introduce our special guest today. I'm really excited to continue Cybersecurity Month with this great presentation. Lorna, over to you.
Thank you so much, Andrea. I'm so pleased to be here with my favorite person on earth here, Shawen. Shawen is from College of the Canyons, and we're going to take you down the security roadmap here. I'm just going to basically ask him a couple questions, and he's going to so graciously answer them. Isn't that right, Shawen?
Absolutely. I don't think I'm going to be as much fun as the first half of this session, though, unfortunately.
It's very difficult to compete with that. But let's start a little bit about, let's talk about you, first of all. Tell us about you, Shawen.
Yeah, so my name's Hsiawen Hull. I'm the Executive Director of Infrastructure and Information Security at College of the Canyons. We are a medium-sized community college in the northern tip of LA County in Southern California. We have about, at any given time, about 14,000 students as our head count. Depending on how you size institutions, we have about 5,000 endpoints. And then I think we have about 2,000 employees between part-time and full-time employees.
And on your team is you, James, and who else?
Well, so our entire IT team is about 40 individuals across like the three different areas. So, right, enterprise applications. I run networking, infrastructure, and like security on the side. And then we've got also our help desk team. So it's a pretty reasonably sized group for what we have.
Okay, and there's a question in the chat about your headset, so let's answer that right away.
I'm on a Jabra, one of the not Jabra, it's the Skull Bones headsets. I forget what it's called.
Just had to throw a curveball in there for you. Keep you on your toes. Tell us a little about the goals for College of the Canyons as it relates to security.
So I think everyone in this space or in this particular call is education, right? So our big goals for security is obviously, securing our environment. Most of us, especially in the community college system, we tend to have spent a lot less money than we'd like to on security, and we've been given a lot less time and kind of the freedom to do the things that we know that we need to in the security space. So I'm very new to the role. I've only been in a dedicated security space for about 2.5 years now. I've been in higher education IT for 26 years, all at the same school. So there's been a lot of years where I've been able to get a lot of social capital, really to understand the district, what we do, our business processes, and kind of like really help shift a lot of our practices and then really help make a substantive change to the things that honestly, over the course of the last 2 years have been no cost. I think the big wins are those policies that we've been able to kind of move forward, as opposed to the systems and the tools that we've been able to implement.
And what have been some of the obstacles that you've come across?
Oh man! So first, and I've heard this. I try really hard to communicate with a lot of the schools within our system. So we have a lot of the same pain points, right? So bad HR data, that's a really good one. Being able to terminate accounts for people that don't work there anymore. When I talk to people in the private industry, I say stuff like that, and they're like, mind blown. Like, your account's usually disabled before you've even left for the day. Whereas, some of our orgs, if you look too hard, you might find people that have been gone for a while. Student accounts. When I first came into the role, one of the issues that we were running into is we were starting to hit the cap, and we didn't even know there was a cap for our Azure Active Directory for the total number of objects, and that total number of objects is 300,000. And so that was a majority of those were student accounts. So, and then before we even touched anything, student accounts were getting compromised, 30, 40 a month. Those compromised accounts were used to attack internal to the organizations. They were used to send phishing emails outside of the organization. So it was a hot mess as I rolled into the environment. There was a lot of different things to do, kind of everything all at once.
Okay. The other thing, the other question that I wanted to ask, we always talk about cost. Obviously, as a precursor to this call, we were talking about the the barriers to entry for a lot of EDU in terms of new technologies and cost. So outside of those barriers, what else was a barrier for your implementations?
Honestly, culture, right? I think the one of the things that most of my colleagues and I run into all the time is in education, your goal and your role is to break down barriers and help students achieve their goals. And so most of our organizations will look at that as make everything as easy as humanly possible. So I talk to schools, and the thought of multi-factor authentication for employees is hard. The talk about multi-factor authentication for students is impossible. So I think that's all of our challenge is how do you contextualize that type of information and make folks understand why it's such a critical point that we kind of get some of these processes into play. And again, I identify while we do have systems and products in place, I think our biggest wins are those protocols, are those processes, are the things that we were able to do to get HR to clean up their data, to come to an understanding with student services and say, hey, we really need to identify a time frame of how long we keep user accounts. And so going from 280,000 student accounts to 30,000 student accounts in the course of like 3 months, right? Just because we sat down and had those conversations. And as I mentioned back there, right, I've been at the same place for 26 years. So when you can walk into some VP's office and say, hey, we really need to have a frank conversation about this, that's really what I think where the big wins really start to come from.
And what was the biggest impact on your decision to move forward with some of those security pieces?
So last year, and this is a part of this is in every slide deck that I have, is last year 9 different community college districts were breached, and experienced a cyber incident in the state of California. I had an opportunity to debrief with 4 of the 6 districts that were reportedly ransomwared, and sitting down with them to understand what happened, what the process was, what recovery looked like, what downtime looked like, and then piecing those things together, and then making sure when I brought that back to my leadership, you sit down and have those very real conversations, right? So when I'm sitting down with my CBO and I'm telling her, hey, so when this happens, right? Because we all know it's not an if, it's a when this happens and we miss our funding deadline for our disbursement deadlines for student financial aid, that's an audit finding. And my CBO doesn't like audit findings. Sitting down with our VP of Student Services who handles registration, and I sat down and I told her, so here, walking through an outside-in looking breach, here's a community college that posted on their Facebook that on this day we're going to do paper pencil registration. And then the minute I said that in an open meeting, the first thing she did was raise her hand and said, Shawen, whatever you need, we will do whatever it takes. And while I'm happy to say that we've done a lot of things, we are not perfect, and we are not where I need us to be, especially in the landscape that we are in today. I do want to make sure and mention that really important item.
So what have you implemented so far, since you're not where you want to be?
So far, the important ones, right? So we've got education space. So right, we've got a pretty robust cybersecurity board policy, right? So that's what allows us to do the things that we can do. Because if anybody asks, say, hey, there's a board policy that says we're allowed to. We have a comprehensive incident response plan. We've done multiple trainings, workthroughs, testing over and over and over again, right? So that's the important stuff, because right, it's not an if, it's a when. Making sure you understand what those things are going to look like. Internal to the district, we've implemented a lot of the tools, right? And actually, the conversation today is has a lot to do with the Microsoft A5 stack, and we were one of the first districts in the state to really start rolling into it and just really starting pushing a lot of those buttons. It was I'd mentioned I came from the help desk before I ended up in a security role, and so a lot of the things that I would do was just sit down late at night ignoring my wife and kids, hopefully because they're sleeping in the other room, and really start to really pour through all of the help documentation, all of the information that I had in front of me to really start to understand what those tools were doing. But the more important part was sitting down and like really debriefing and really understanding what the actual threats to us as education is. And I think that is the most important part, right? Because I think some of the security leaders I've worked through and worked with is, we get stuck on this mindset of like, we can't possibly do any of those things because, if we do, we can't do this one thing, and because we can't, we're not going to do anything. And that decision paralysis is what sticks a lot of us, especially in education, is I can't make this decision here because no one will let me. But, there's this whole stack of other things that we can do, cleaning up your Active Directory, making sure that, we're segmenting, user access, that we're, God forbid, taking away local machine administrative access to people that don't need it. And those are really, really, really horrible and hard conversations that in the education space, the minute you say those things out loud, they really start to put, nails on chalkboards for a lot of people.
It looks like we have a couple questions in the chat, so I'm going to take a pause here and see if we can answer some of those, aside from the headset questions. Skull Candy headset series? Yes, okay. Bone conduction? Okay, so that's what it looks like.
I looked at they're the open comms aftershock headset, so they do have the boom mic, and then they also have the bone conduction.
Okay. So the question here from Chris is, what was the communication like for eliminating the old student accounts?
So the important part is contextualization, right? The reason why we always say no is because somewhere on our website one day we posted everybody gets it for all time. Everybody gets free A3 licenses forever, right, Lorna? And so that was step one, is trying to walk that information back. Blaming, not gonna lie, I blamed Lorna 100%, right? Lorna's my my salesperson. And so, man, Microsoft came back to me and they said, they're taking this away. This is not something we can do anymore, which wasn't a lie, but it helped us start that conversation. So when I sat down with our ASG and I'm like, the reason why this has to go away is because the licensing is going to go away. But on top of that too, what are our realities? How are we seeing this? We're seeing stale accounts. We're seeing students that haven't used their email accounts in years. And so those are creating real problems. I think during COVID, we actually had multiple breached accounts from students that hadn't been to the district in a couple of years, used to target phish our other student accounts. And I'm sure everyone's seen the UNICEF scam, is what we've been calling it, which is I'm going to mail you a cashier's check, you cash it, you keep part of it and send me the rest in, say, a gift card. And while we in this space are like, we wouldn't fall for that, I can tell you the names of the 12 students that got compromised in that way. And those are the ones just reported to us. How do you take that information back and sit down with your leadership and say, the reason why this is happening is because we are not doing a job of cleaning up those accounts and kind of taking those things away? There is a whole host of things that you have to be considerate of. I was in a session at EDUCAUSE where one of the schools presented just on this topic alone. That was an hour-long session with like 100 million questions. I will tell you that some of your students are still using there for various reasons, right? Amazon discounts, Adobe discounts are the big ones. Those were the big complaints that I got. But my wife, right? It was Sunday night. My wife rolls, my wife's on the computer trying to do something, and I'm like, "What's going on?" And she's like, "I think I registered my nursing degree or my nursing license with the state of California with my student email account that you disabled a year ago." And that's your realistic, right? So you've got students who are tying their accomplishments at your schools to that email account and forgetting about it. So when push comes to shove, they're going to need access to those things. So having that really serious conversation, letting your leadership know these are going to be the fallouts of when this happens, right? These are the awareness items that you need to know that if we go down this road, those are the problems that we're going to run into.
I'm sure she wasn't very happy with that, but Brett has a question here. He says, we're getting serious about the removal of local admin rights. What was the process to communicate that change and implement it?
Why do you need it? That's the question number one, right? And we actually, luckily, we started that conversation about 10 years ago. So and the question number one is, why do you need it? And most of the time people didn't know, right? I don't know why I need it. I think I do. And so when you sit down with them and start to really explain to them why that's a problem, right? And so again, debriefing with schools, understanding what's going on, right? So having a local administrator account get breached for a standard user with a bad password, do you use multiple passwords? Do you use laps inside of your environment, right? Because if that one user gets breached, a simple query, a simple dump of the local hashes, you've got elevated admin accounts if they're on there, you've got local admin accounts if they're on there. All of these reasons are exactly why you don't do that. And even from a compliance standpoint, how do you manage your environment? How do you make sure that users are not installing software that they're not supposed to be? That's the really big part of the why. And so I see crappy software that places configuration settings inside the program's file folder. And so my argument to that is, and this doesn't work for everybody, right? That's really the important thing is most of our orgs are moving to SaaS solutions, right? A lot of us, we've been slow to shift to the cloud, but most of our users have already transitioned, right? A lot of our previously on-prem applications have moved to SaaS solutions, have, our counseling software, our, this software, or that software, a lot of these things are moving towards SaaS. So what we're finding is there are a lot less, and again, I'm speaking from my environment specifically, not having to need those anymore is really a big thing. When was the last time you took a comprehensive inventory of your environment to know what it was actually running? And those are the pieces that have always been missing for us until more recently, is understanding what's running in our environment and what people are using. And so that is a very time-consuming process. It's it's a part of the NIST compliant frameworks. GLBA is a big one, right? I think most everybody in this particular session is probably higher ed. GLBA is on the top of all of our minds within our organization, specifically because I'm making it a part of that. And so that's what's also helped drive a lot of these conversations. If you don't know what that is, I really do encourage you to take a look at what GLBA compliance is. Again, back to the compliance piece of it, sitting down with my CBO and say, hey, if we fall out of compliance with GLBA, which is something that our Federal Student Aid Commission is requiring us to do, we can't issue checks for student financial aid. How's that going to look for our enrollment? And so that's really the big thing, again, is how are you as security leaders, taking that contextual information back and winning over the people that don't want to move with you.
Lots of comments there in the chat about taking away. Don't move my cheese. Don't move my cheese, Shawen. Don't do it.
Oh man, and I'll tell you so. And I again remember I ran help desk. I either was in help desk or ran help desk for 26 years. And I will tell you, as the security administrator, I created most of these problems. I created like 90% of the issues that I'm cleaning up right now, because again, we want to make sure that our users are happy. We want to make sure that we can quickly address the situations that are going on. I mean, my team that I left behind, they half of them don't speak to me anymore because pulling a lot of those accesses away because you don't need it. I'm sorry, it's outside of the scope of the role, is a hard conversation to have. I've done multiple presentations on the hardest battle to win in the cybersecurity war is not even your users. It's not your leadership. It's IT. It's when you move into a security role and you start having these conversations about, hey, does a technician really need, and this is a hard one, does a technician really need local admin access to a box? Do you really need to elevate on that box to do something? We automate deployment. On the occasion you need something, but is it necessary for all boxes all the time? And again, those are the really, really tough conversations that we as security leaders have to have that nobody wants to have, because again, it makes my job a little harder.
So I'll ask if anybody wants to come off mute and ask a direct question versus chat. Going once, going twice.
Can I ask you one? Am I working?
Sure.
You are working. Go.
Okay, sweet. So I'm currently on the engineering side, but in my previous role, I was a tech with our College of Sciences. And we had so much software from like Shimatsu and all these other microscope vendors and electron microscopes and biology things, and I can't even describe what they do because I'm not a scientist. All right, but we've got dozens of these things, and out of curiosity, many of these things require admin access. If you remove it, the vendors will refuse to touch it. A handful of them will even require constant internet access to maintain a license. You disconnect that internet, the software stops working. You can't even back up the software because they give you the computer and you can't move it to any other computer. So what did you guys do with any of these types of bizarre things? I'm just curious because it makes me laugh a little bit because that was my fight for years.
Right. So segment your risks, right? And that's the big part, right? So we're dealing right now with we've dealt with for about a year these very very questionable, and again, we're a community college, so electron microscopes is outside of our scope of things that we do, but our faculty started bringing in these wireless microscopes, Wi-Fi required, no Bluetooth, no nothing, so they have to sit on our network. And so understanding where the threats are, right? So what are the needs of that particular device? We also have smart dummies for our nursing program. Those devices require, like you said, internet access. Segmenting those devices off onto IoT networks was one of the primary reasons why we kind of set those aside. We make sure those machines are not on our domain, run an EDR or an MDR of some type on that product to at least try to keep it as safe as possible. But again, segment that particular device. Try to make sure that they can't touch what you're working on. I would bet most of our organizations probably have some type of computer networking program. I mean, right, think about even closer to that, right? Instead of just having, say, a rogue device that's trying to do wrong on your network, you have an entire program where you're teaching cybersecurity experts how to do things inside of an environment. And are those folks touching you? Those are the scary ones. Those are the ones that really cause me some ire at the end of the night. So segmenting out that traffic, making sure that they don't have the ability to touch the critical and important devices. We are on a roadmap to get a lot of that stuff done. It's not, again, I don't claim to be perfect, but that's the ultimate goal, is segmenting your risk, understanding what those risks are.
There's another question about thanks, David. Removing email from former students, and I'm finding that many have used this address mailbox for bank accounts. Oh my goodness. Utilities, Amazon, mortgages. Really, their digital life is in an account from 10 years ago.
Yep.
I mean, when you really think about it, it sounds to me like at Hotmail, and at AOL, what are we doing?
And that's our fault, right? We did that, right? When we launched these services, I remember I was there when it happened. We were choosing between Google and Microsoft, and we just happened to pick Microsoft as a solution. And what we said, there was a website that said, you get to keep this forever. And at that point, you have to make a decision. Like again, we're now talking about the security of our infrastructure, of our environment, and we have to understand that we can't do that anymore. Organizations like us, I have a very small team of 1.5, right? I'm the half. I've got a security admin. I've got a couple of sysadmins. And so we cannot continue to support 200,000 accounts in perpetuity. So it has to be a district decision to move forward. Luckily, the nice thing is it's going to be really annoying and it's going to be really obnoxious, where they're going to lose their Amazon discounts. They're going to lose their Adobe discounts. They're going to lose, access to some of those systems, but you can call. Even though my wife waited until 10 o'clock at night on the day that she had to, on Sunday night, the day that she had to renew her license, I can't, well, in my case, I can control that. But in most cases, the hope is that these things aren't happening in those time periods. You have to pick up the phone. You have to call your bank and say, hey, I need to transition my email. I know it's painful. I know that it's hard, but it has to be done. And honestly, communication, it was a 5-month process. The initial email that says, hey, we know we made this commitment to you a while ago, but we need to make a change. And these are going to go away. And so that was the start. Once, 5 months out, 3 months out, 2 months out, 1 month out, 2 weeks out, sending those notifications, letting users know that, hey, this is going away. I think Google Schools, not that I should probably say that out loud in this session, but the conversation that came up with the other organization was, you could leverage Google for your single sign-on. So instead of just getting emails sent to your edu account, you are actually using your edu account to log into services from a Google perspective. Again, those are tough, those are really hard, but they have to be conversations that we have, because if you're in the edu space and you're still supporting those old emails, what I'm talking about. That they are the breeding ground for hackers, phishers, all of the things. And so contextualizing that for leadership and letting them know this is why we have to start shutting this stuff down. That's the goal. That's the reason.
This is
And
true.
we're going to be
I'm
the most
sorry.
hated people at the university. I
Yeah,
like
yeah,
that.
that's what it is.
Man, you don't get into the security space to be everybody's friend. It's really unfortunate. Again, I have a lot of people not happy with me, but I have a lot more happier with me. Like as we go through the next day and the next day and the next day, knowing that we're making better strides to clean up our environment, to support the students, to make sure. I mentioned it earlier. We went from no multi-factor authentication in our environment in February. On May the 4th, we picked that very specifically because you can't get mad at the nerd that's telling you to do stuff. But May the 4th, mandatory multi-factor authentication for all employees. The following September, this is all in the same year. The following September, we were mandatory multi-factor authentication for all students. Right? Again, it's having this really complicated conversation about why. And so sitting down with our ASG, sitting down with student groups, sitting down, contextualizing security. Not everyone's going to like it, but we have to do it. We are not safe anymore. For the last 10 years, we've been safe, right? And everybody knew schools were hands off. Schools and healthcare, those were off limits because they do good, right? 2022 rolls in, and all of a sudden now we're the #1 attacked organization in the world. It was schools and healthcare like 1 and 2. This year, as we're watching, it's mostly state and locals. But schools are still in there. I know of a couple incidents that are going on right now that we're kind of monitoring and keeping an eye on. But again, how are we contextualizing that and bringing that back to our users?
Well, Shawen, this has been extremely useful for the group. And Andrea,
so.
you're coming back on to close us out. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much, both of you. When I saw you present at the California Education Summit here in California, I knew that this group would really appreciate hearing from you. I think this is the first presentation we've had all year where there was no slide deck, and we really just got to hear from users that are really in this every day and folks that are dealing with it every day. So thank you so much for coming on, being honest and authentic. I think it's great to hear from someone who's living it every day. And hopefully we'll get to have you both on again. And thank you for helping us close out cybersecurity month. The rest of my team should be coming back on here as we close out. Anything, last thoughts, Victoria, Chandler, anything we need to make sure we ask these folks before we let them go?
I can't think of anything. I wish I would have brought give stuff to this call. So maybe next week I'll think of something to talk about here. But I second that. I think it was nice that we just got to have an open conversation here. We love hearing directly from our customers. So thank you so much for joining the call.
So long,
And
everyone.
again, sorry I wasn't nearly as much fun as the beginning.
Well, that the beginning is the beginning. Nobody can top